Benjamin Walsh was 32 years old and sitting in a divorce attorney's office when he received the news that would change everything. His father had just died, and his wife of 6 years, Lisa, had filed for divorce 3 days after the funeral. But what she didn't know yet, what nobody knew yet, was about to turn her carefully calculated betrayal into the biggest mistake of her life. Benjamin worked as a software developer at TechCore Solutions in Austin, Texas, making $78,000 a year. It was decent money, enough for the mortgage on their modest three-bedroom house in the suburbs, enough for the two Honda sedans in their driveway, enough for an annual vacation to somewhere warm. Lisa worked as an executive assistant to Charles Brennan, the CEO of TechCore, making $45,000 annually. They'd been comfortable, not wealthy, but secure, or so Benjamin had thought. His father, William Walsh, had died of a sudden heart attack at age 67. He'd been a quiet man, worked for 43 years as a maintenance supervisor at various office buildings downtown. He lived in a small rental apartment in East Austin, drove a 15-year-old Ford pickup truck, shopped at discount grocery stores, and never took vacations beyond camping trips to state parks. Benjamin had visited him every Sunday for dinner, eating the same rotation of simple meals: meatloaf, spaghetti, chicken casserole, pot roast. His father would ask about work, about Lisa, about when they might give him grandchildren. The conversations were comfortable, predictable, unremarkable. At the funeral, there had been maybe 20 people. A few former co-workers, some neighbors, Benjamin and Lisa, and an elderly lawyer named Stanley Hoffman, who Benjamin didn't recognize. The service was simple, held at a small chapel Benjamin's father had chosen years ago and paid for in advance. Everything about William Walsh's life had been simple, modest, carefully budgeted. Lisa had seemed distracted throughout the funeral, checking her phone constantly. Benjamin had noticed but attributed it to work stress. Charles had been demanding lately, she'd explained. Big merger happening at the company. She needed to be available. Benjamin had nodded, grieving his father, not paying much attention to his wife's unusual behavior. 3 days after they buried William Walsh, Lisa sat Benjamin down in their living room. She'd made coffee, which should have been his first warning sign. Lisa never made coffee in the evening. She sat across from him, hands folded in her lap, and spoke with the calm detachment of someone who'd rehearsed her lines. "Benjamin, I want a divorce." The words hung in the air like smoke. Benjamin had stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "What?" "I've been unhappy for a long time," Lisa continued, her voice steady. "We want different things. You're content with your little tech job and your Sunday dinners and your simple life. I want more than that. I deserve more than that. Lisa, my father just died 3 days ago. Can we talk about this later? Can we?" "The timing isn't ideal, I know, but I've already filed the paperwork. I've moved into Charles's house. We're together now. We've been together for 8 months. 8 months. Benjamin felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. His wife had been sleeping with his boss, his CEO, for 8 months. While he'd been working 60-hour weeks trying to impress Charles. While he'd been eating Sunday dinners with his father, telling him how well things were going at work, how happy his marriage was. While he'd been planning to surprise Lisa with a trip to Hawaii for their anniversary next month. "Charles?" Benjamin managed to say. "Charles Brennan? My boss? He's going to divorce his wife too. We're going to be together properly. He's successful, Benjamin. He's ambitious. He's going somewhere. You're 32 years old, making $78,000 with no prospects for advancement. Do you know what Charles is worth? $18 million. He drives a Porsche. He owns 3 homes. He can give me the life I always wanted." Benjamin had felt numb. Too numb to even be angry yet. The grief for his father mixed with this new betrayal created a fog in his mind. "You waited until my father died to tell me this?" Lisa had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "I didn't want to add more stress while you were dealing with his illness. I was trying to be considerate." "Considerate," Benjamin repeated flatly. "I'll be reasonable about the house and assets," Lisa said, standing up. "My attorney will be in touch. I've already moved my things out. I'm sorry it ended this way, but honestly, Benjamin, you were never going to be enough for me." Your father was a maintenance man who died with nothing. You're following right in his footsteps. I can't spend my life struggling." She'd left then, walking out of their house, out of their marriage, into Charles Brennan's Porsche that was waiting in the driveway. Benjamin had watched from the window as Charles kissed her, right there in front of the house Benjamin was still paying for, and drove away. Before we continue with what Benjamin discovers, if you believe people always reveal their true colors eventually, hit that subscribe button for Story Mode Folktales and turn on the notification bell. We'd also love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now let's see what Benjamin finds out. The next morning, still in shock, Benjamin had gone to work. He'd walked through tech core solutions like a ghost, unable to focus on code, unable to think about anything except Lisa's words. Your father died with nothing. You're following right in his footsteps. Charles had been in his office, door closed, probably planning his new life with Lisa. Benjamin's co-workers had noticed something was off, but he'd brushed off their concerns. Family stuff, he'd said, still dealing with Dad's death. That afternoon, Stanley Hoffman called, the elderly lawyer with the kind voice who'd been at the funeral. "Mr. Walsh, I'm sorry for your loss. I was your father's attorney for the past 28 years. I need to schedule an appointment with you to discuss his estate. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon? Estate. Benjamin almost laughed. What estate? His father had rented his apartment, drove a truck worth maybe $3,000, had worked a blue-collar job his entire life. There was probably a small life insurance policy, maybe a few thousand in a savings account. Sure, Benjamin said tiredly. I'll be there. He'd hung up and stared at his computer screen, his mind blank. His wife had left him. His father was dead. His boss was sleeping with his ex-wife. And now he had to deal with the paperwork of closing out his father's meager estate. That evening, Benjamin sat alone in his house, the house that felt too big and too quiet now. He ordered Chinese food he didn't eat. He tried to watch TV but couldn't focus. He kept thinking about his father. All those Sunday dinners, all those simple conversations. His father had never complained about his modest life. He'd seemed content, maybe even happy. He'd had his routines, his small pleasures. He'd never wanted for anything, or at least he'd never said he did. Benjamin remembered when he'd graduated from college with his computer science degree. His father had been so proud, tears in his eyes at the ceremony. "You're going to do great things, son," William had said. "You're going to have opportunities I never had. You're going to be successful." And yet, standing at his father's funeral, Lisa had dismissed William Walsh as a failure, a maintenance man who died with nothing, a cautionary tale of a wasted life. The anger finally came then, hot and fierce. Lisa had no idea who his father really was. She'd met William maybe 10 times in 6 years of marriage, always keeping their visits short, always finding excuses to leave early. She'd never bothered to know him, to understand that contentment wasn't the same as failure, that a quiet life wasn't necessarily a failed life. Benjamin pulled out his phone and scrolled through photos of his father. William at his birthday party last year, smiling over a grocery store cake. William showing Benjamin how to fix a leaky faucet. William sitting in his worn recliner, reading a paperback Western novel from the library. A simple man living a simple life. Your father died with nothing. The words burned. Benjamin set down his phone and cried for the first time since the funeral. He cried for his father. He cried for his marriage. He cried for the life he'd thought he was building that had turned out to be built on sand. The next day at 1:45 in the afternoon, Benjamin walked into Stanley Hoffman's law office. It was in an old building downtown, the kind with marble floors and wood paneling, where attorneys who'd been practicing since the 70s maintained offices that smelled like leather and old books. Stanley Hoffman was probably 80 years old, with white hair and wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a suit that looked expensive but decades out of style. "Mr. Walsh," Stanley said, shaking his hand with surprising strength. "Please sit down. I'm very sorry for your loss. Your father was an extraordinary man." Benjamin sat in the leather chair across from the massive oak desk. "Thank you. He spoke highly of you." Stanley smiled sadly. "I represented your father for 28 years. I handled various matters for him. Investments, property acquisitions, corporate structures. Your father was a very private man, Mr. Walsh. A very, very private man. Benjamin frowned. I'm not sure I understand. My dad worked maintenance his whole life. What investments? Stanley opened a thick folder on his desk. Your father's official employment was indeed as a maintenance supervisor. He worked diligently, saved carefully, and never drew attention to himself. But what you didn't know, what nobody knew except me and a very small group of financial advisors, was that your father was one of the most successful private investors in Texas. Benjamin stared at Stanley Hoffman across the massive oak desk, certain he'd misunderstood. I'm sorry, what? Your father, William Walsh, began investing in commercial real estate in 1978 when he was 21 years old. He purchased his first small apartment building for $68,000 using money he'd saved from working 2 jobs. Over the next 46 years, he built an investment portfolio that I can only describe as extraordinary. Stanley slid a document across the desk. Benjamin looked down at rows of numbers, property addresses, investment accounts. The figures seemed impossible. This is a preliminary accounting of your father's estate. The full audit will take several weeks, but the estimated total value is approximately $2.3 billion. The office went silent except for the ticking of an antique clock on the wall. Benjamin couldn't breathe. 2.3 billion. With a B, his father, William Walsh, the man who clipped coupons and drove a 15-year-old truck and lived in a 2-bedroom rental apartment. That's impossible, Benjamin whispered. He lived in an $850 a month apartment. He worked maintenance until he was 65. Your father was extraordinarily disciplined, Stanley explained gently. He loved his maintenance work. He said it kept him grounded, gave him purpose, helped him understand the real world. But after work, he studied markets, analyzed properties, made calculated investments. He started with apartment buildings in East Austin in the late 70s and early 80s, when the area was considered undesirable. He bought them for almost nothing. Those properties are now worth collectively over $400 million. Benjamin felt dizzy. Stanley continued, flipping through the folder. He invested early in technology stocks. Apple in 1980, Microsoft in 1986, Amazon in 1997, Google in 2004. He held those positions through market crashes that would have terrified other investors. He bought commercial properties in downtown Austin before the tech boom. He purchased agricultural land in areas he predicted would see development. He invested in startups that became major companies. And critically, he never touched the principal. He lived off his maintenance salary and let everything compound for 46 years. $2.3 billion, Benjamin said, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. My father had $2.3 billion and lived in a rental apartment. He had his reasons, Stanley said quietly. Your father grew up very poor. His father was an alcoholic who spent every dollar on whiskey. Your grandmother worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. William watched what wealth did to people in this city. The showboating, the greed, the way money poisoned relationships. He told me once that he never wanted his wealth to define him or the people in his life. He wanted to be loved for who he was, not what he had. Benjamin thought of all those Sunday dinners, his father asking about his week, his job, his marriage, never mentioning that he could have bought TechCore Solutions 100 times over, never letting on that he owned half the buildings Benjamin passed on his way to work. He left it all to you, Stanley said. Every single asset, every property, every stock, every investment account. There are some charitable provisions in the will, significant donations to causes he cared about, but the bulk of the estate comes to you. You are now, as of your father's death, one of the wealthiest individuals in Texas. Benjamin couldn't process it. His mind kept returning to 3 days ago. Lisa sitting in their living room. Your father died with nothing. You're following right in his footsteps. Does anyone else know? Benjamin asked. About the money? No one except the small team of financial advisors who manage the portfolio. Your father was adamant about privacy. He even used corporate structures and trusts to keep his name off public records. I'm the executor of the estate, and I've been instructed to release this information only to you. Benjamin stood up, paced to the window overlooking downtown Austin. Below, people hurried along the sidewalks. Normal people living normal lives. He'd been one of them yesterday. Now he was a billionaire. There's something else, Stanley said carefully. Your father included specific instructions in his will regarding certain individuals. He asked me to wait 30 days after his death to execute these instructions, to give you time to process everything. But I need to tell you about them now. Benjamin turned from the window. Stanley pulled out another document. Your father had extensive documentation about certain people in your life. He was concerned about your marriage. He'd observed your wife's behavior, her treatment of you, her values. He hired a private investigator 6 months ago when he noticed she seemed different. The investigator documented everything. Benjamin felt cold. What did he find? Your wife began her affair with Charles Brennan 8 months ago. The investigator has photos, videos, recordings of conversations. Your father also had Charles Brennan investigated. Did you know that Brennan's net worth is actually negative $7 million? He's deeply in debt. The Porsche is leased. The houses are mortgaged to the maximum. He's been embezzling from TechCore Solutions for the past 3 years, approximately $3.4 million. Your father documented everything and provided it to the appropriate authorities. Benjamin sat back down heavily. He knew. My father knew Lisa was cheating. He wanted to tell you, but he worried you wouldn't believe him. He worried you'd think he was trying to control your life. So he documented everything and created a plan to protect you. The embezzlement evidence was submitted to law enforcement 2 weeks before his death, but he requested they wait to act until after his passing. He didn't want you to think he was doing this for revenge. He wanted you to understand it was about justice. When will they arrest Charles? Benjamin asked, his voice hollow. According to my contact at the FBI, the arrest warrant will be executed tomorrow morning. The evidence is overwhelming. Charles Brennan will be charged with multiple counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. He's looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Benjamin thought about Lisa, moving in with Charles 3 days after his father's funeral, planning their wealthy life together, based entirely on a lie. Charles had no money. He was a criminal heading to prison, and Lisa had left a man who just inherited $2.3 billion for a bankrupt con artist. The irony was so perfect it almost didn't seem real. There's one more thing, Stanley said. Your father left a letter for you. He asked me to give it to you after I explained the estate. He handed Benjamin a sealed envelope. I'll give you privacy to read it. Take all the time you need. Stanley left the office, closing the door behind him. Benjamin sat alone in the leather chair, holding his father's letter. His hands were shaking as he opened it. The handwriting was instantly recognizable. His father's careful, neat script. Dear Benjamin, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Stanley has told you about the money. I imagine you're shocked, maybe angry that I kept this secret from you your whole life. I want to explain why. I grew up with nothing. My father drank away every penny we had. I watched my mother work herself to exhaustion. I promised myself I'd be different, that I'd build security for my family. I started investing young, and I was lucky, smart, yes, but also lucky. But I saw what wealth did to people in this city. I saw marriages destroyed by prenups and suspicion. I saw children who knew their parents' net worth, but not their parents' hearts. I saw people loved for their money and then destroyed when they lost it. I wanted you to grow up normal, Benjamin. I wanted you to work hard because you valued work, not because you needed money. I wanted you to marry someone who loved you for who you were, not what you had. I wanted you to build character that would last no matter what happened. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, StoryMode Folktales, if you haven't, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And drop a comment below telling me what you think Benjamin should do next. We're about to see just how perfect his father's plan really was. I worried about Lisa. I watched her at family dinners, saw how she looked at our simple meals, our simple conversations. She was never content. She always wanted more. When I hired the investigator and learned about her affair, I wasn't surprised. I was heartbroken for you, but not surprised. I'm leaving you everything I built, son. But more importantly, I'm leaving you the truth about the people in your life. Lisa showed you who she really is when she thought you had nothing. Charles revealed his character when he stole from his own company. These truths are more valuable than any amount of money. Use the wealth wisely. Help people. Build something meaningful. But most importantly, remember that your worth was never about money. You were enough exactly as you were. Lisa couldn't see that. Her loss. I'm proud of you, Benjamin. Always have been. Always will be. I love you, son. Dad. Benjamin read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. His father had known, had seen everything, had protected him even from beyond the grave. The next morning at 9:15, the FBI arrested Charles Brennan at TechCore Solutions headquarters. Benjamin wasn't there to see it. He was in Stanley Hoffman's office signing documents, but his former co-workers would later describe the scene. 8 federal agents walking through the lobby, Charles being led out in handcuffs. The shocked silence in the office as people realized their CEO was a criminal. The news hit the local media by noon. Charles Brennan, prominent Austin Tech CEO, arrested for embezzling $3.4 million. The story detailed years of fraudulent transactions, fake invoices, money laundered through shell companies. Every major news outlet picked it up. By evening, it was trending on social media. Lisa called Benjamin's phone 47 times that day. He didn't answer. She left voicemails that progressed from confused to frantic to desperate. Benjamin, I don't understand what's happening. They arrested Charles. They're saying he stole money. This has to be a mistake. Benjamin, please call me back. I need to talk to you. I don't know what to do. Benjamin, I made a mistake. Leaving you was a mistake. Can we talk? Please? He listened to the messages once, then blocked her number. The divorce attorney Lisa had hired called Stanley Hoffman's office. She wanted to withdraw the divorce petition. She wanted to reconcile. She was willing to go to counseling. Stanley, under Benjamin's instruction, informed her attorney that the divorce would proceed as originally planned, but Benjamin would not be seeking any assets from Lisa. She could keep everything from their marriage, the house, the furniture, the cars. Benjamin wanted nothing from that life. The divorce would be quick, clean, and final. 2 weeks later, Benjamin sat in his father's apartment for the last time. He'd kept the lease through the end of the month, wanting time to go through his father's belongings, to understand the man who'd secretly been a billionaire while living like this. The apartment was exactly as William had left it. Worn furniture from secondhand stores, books from the library, photos on the walls of Benjamin at various ages, at his college graduation, at his wedding, little moments William had treasured. A coffee can in the kitchen where he'd saved quarters for the laundry. In the bedroom closet behind the worn shirts and simple pants, Benjamin found a box. Inside were newspaper clippings, articles about the buildings his father owned, the developments he'd invested in, maps of Austin marked with properties and notes, investment journals filled with detailed analysis, and photos, dozens of photos of Benjamin at different ages, with notes in his father's handwriting. Benjamin's first day of kindergarten, 5 years old, so proud of him. Benjamin's soccer game. He didn't score, but he tried so hard. That's what matters. Benjamin graduated college. First in our family, never been prouder. Every major moment of Benjamin's life, documented and treasured by a father who'd had billions, but valued these simple memories more than any amount of money. Benjamin found himself crying again, but this time it was different. Not grief exactly. Gratitude. His father had given him more than wealth. He'd given him truth, protection, and a final lesson about what really mattered. 3 months later, Benjamin stood in Stanley Hoffman's office again, signing documents to establish the William Walsh Foundation. The foundation would focus on education for low-income students, job training programs, and supporting families struggling with addiction, the issues his father had cared about most. Benjamin seeded the foundation with $500 million. Your father would be proud, Stanley said, watching Benjamin sign the final papers. I'm trying to honor what he taught me, Benjamin replied. That wealth is a responsibility, not just a reward. The TechCore Solutions Board of Directors had reached out through Stanley. With Charles in prison and the company in turmoil, they were looking for new leadership. They'd learned about Benjamin's inheritance and wanted to offer him the CEO position. The irony was too perfect. Benjamin declined. He had other plans. Instead, he used $100 million to start his own company, Walsh Technologies. He hired people he'd worked with at TechCore, good people who deserved better than what Charles had provided. He implemented profit sharing, generous benefits, work-life balance policies. Within 6 months, Walsh Technologies was attracting top talent and landing major contracts. Benjamin moved out of the house he'd shared with Lisa. He bought a modest but comfortable home in the hills outside Austin, with a view of the city his father had loved. He donated the marital home to a charity that housed families in transition. Lisa, he heard through mutual acquaintances, was working as a receptionist at a dental office. Charles's legal troubles had left her toxic by association in corporate circles. She lost the executive assistant job, lost her reputation, lost everything she'd been so certain would make her happy. Benjamin felt no satisfaction in her downfall. His father had been right. The truth had revealed itself. Lisa had chosen money over character and ended up with neither. One Sunday evening, 6 months after his father's death, Benjamin drove to the cemetery where William Walsh was buried. It was a simple grave, no elaborate marker, just as his father had requested. Benjamin sat on the grass beside it, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. "I miss our Sunday dinners," he said quietly. "I miss talking to you about work, about life. I miss thinking we were just ordinary people living ordinary lives." He paused, then smiled. "You were right about Lisa. You were right about Charles. You were right that wealth reveals truth. I wish you were here to see what I'm building with the foundation, with the company. I think you'd approve." A warm breeze moved through the cemetery, rustling the leaves of the oak trees. Benjamin sat there for a long time, feeling connected to his father in a way he hadn't even when William was alive. Now he understood what his father had been trying to teach him through example, that character, integrity, and purpose mattered more than any external measure of success. "I'm not going to hide the wealth like you did," Benjamin said, "but I'm going to use it the way you would have wanted. I'm going to help people. I'm going to build something meaningful. And I'm going to make sure I never forget what you taught me." He stood, brushed off his jeans, and walked back to his car. As he drove away from the cemetery, Benjamin thought about the bizarre path his life had taken. 6 months ago, he'd been a software developer with a failing marriage. His father had been a maintenance worker. Life had seemed small, predictable, unremarkable. Now he was a billionaire philanthropist running a successful company. His ex-wife was a receptionist who'd thrown away her marriage for a criminal. His ex-boss was in federal prison, and his father, the man Lisa had dismissed as a failure, had proven to be one of the most successful investors in Texas history. The lesson his father had taught him was simple but profound. Your worth isn't determined by what others can see. It's determined by your character when no one is watching, your integrity when it would be easier to compromise, your values when they're tested by circumstance. Lisa had failed that test spectacularly. She'd chosen appearances over substance, money over loyalty, status over love. She'd revealed exactly who she was when she thought Benjamin had nothing. That revelation, as painful as it had been, was the greatest gift she could have given him. She'd shown him the truth before he'd wasted more years with someone who never truly knew him or valued him. Charles had failed too, stealing from his own company, lying to everyone around him, building a life on deception and debt. He was paying the price for those choices now, and would continue paying for years to come. Benjamin's father had passed the test in the most remarkable way. He'd accumulated enormous wealth, but never let it corrupt him. He'd remained humble, hardworking, and focused on what truly mattered. And he'd protected his son even after death, ensuring that Benjamin would learn the truth about the people in his life and have the resources to build something meaningful. If you enjoyed this story about the power of patience, truth, and quiet integrity, please subscribe to StoryMode Folktales and hit that notification bell. And like this video if you believe that character matters more than circumstances. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you think William Walsh made the right choice keeping his wealth secret. Remember, people will always reveal their true nature when tested. The ones who love you will stand by you when you have nothing. The ones who don't will leave the moment they think you're not useful anymore. Choose your relationships based on character, not circumstances. Build your life on values that won't change when your situation does. And never forget that the most valuable inheritance isn't money. It's wisdom, integrity, and the example of someone who lived those values even when no one was watching. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.